Under the blood moon, love became a battlefield. A bride caught between a ruthless alpha who would burn the world to keep her, and a vampire who would burn her soul to claim her. This is not just a story. It is an obsession written in fire and blood by Luna William.
She woke believing the night would be merciful, because the bond still burned on her skin. The mark at the base of her throat, pressed there beneath the blood moon, pulsed like a small, obedient star. She told herself it was because the Alpha had chosen her before the pack, before even the gods, because his presence filled every room like heat after a long winter. Safety broke the way frost breaks under a boot. One clean sound, and then splinters everywhere. It happened in the glass. Pale light seeped through the curtains. She lifted her face to the mirror and saw what love had made of her, soft, wanted, claimed. Then the image shifted. For a heartbeat, her pupils went crimson. Her lips curved in a smile she did not make. Breath misted the glass from the inside, as if something watched from within the silver. Ilara stumbled back, hand flying to her mark. It throbbed harder, answering a call she had not heard. The door opened, and before his boots touched the floorboards she felt him. Weight, heat, command. Ilara, her name was a vow in his mouth. What happened? She did not want to say it. The mirror looked back. He came to stand behind her. In the glass their eyes met, his glacial blue, hers wide and uncertain. He touched the mark with 2 fingers, reverent and possessive. Who touched you? No one. She hated the tremor in her voice. He drew her against him with a tenderness sharpened by fear. I believe you, he said, and the bond warmed under his palm. But someone thinks they can look. By noon the pack had learned how to whisper. At the well, women stepped aside. At the ovens, the baker's boy measured less bread. She walked past all of it with her chin high. At the training yard, the Alpha's second, Lysander, spoke with 3 elders whose voices carried like crows. Conversation snapped when she approached. One elder made the sign against the old knight. Another smiled the way wolves smile when they circle a wound. I would like to train, she said. The title Luna still felt heavier than her bones. Lysander's gaze flicked to her throat and filled with pity. Perhaps rest. I am not sick. She took a staff, set her feet, and let motion wash thought out of her skull. For a while the stick's song drowned rumor. Then the wind changed. Cold licked the yard. Shadows lengthened though the sun had not moved. She turned toward the palisade, and beyond the spears under the pines a figure stood. He was beautiful the way an empty house is beautiful. Symmetrical, silent, wrong. Skin like cut milk. Eyes like wine on snow. He did not step forward. He simply let the seeing do the work. Her grip weakened. The staff slipped. The elders' whispers rose. The Alpha arrived between heartbeats, one blink and he was a wall in front of her, leather and storm filling her lungs. What do you see? He asked, gaze locked on the trees. Wine, she said, ashamed of the softness. And winter. Vampire, he spat it like rust. His wolf rose so hard the yard felt smaller. Inside, he ordered without looking at her. Lysander with her. She obeyed. The house held its breath for them. The vampire's presence did not enter, but his absence did. She felt the lack like a mouth open in the dark, waiting to speak into her bones. Dusk bled purple when he returned, smelling of smoke. Anger heat-lined the room. His hands framed her face, thumbs under her jaw, protective enough to bruise. Did he look again? No, but I felt him. He glanced at the cloth-draped mirror. He wants you to doubt the bond. I don't, she said quickly. The mirror had smiled without her. A traitor part of her wondered what it would be like to be wanted by everything that did not deserve to want her. I don't. Listen to me. He bent until his mouth warmed her ear. I chose you. The moon witnessed it. The gods can tear me open if I fail, but they cannot unmake my vow. You are mine, only mine always. He kissed the mark with hunger. The bond leapt like a struck bell. For a breath she felt safe. Then the door thudded. Someone had kicked it and run. Laughter threaded the dusk, thin, beautiful wrong. He moved toward the sound. She followed with her hand tangled in his coat. The village green lay empty, but not alone. A cracked mirror leaned against the well. 3 red petals floated on the water. In the silence, even crickets lacked the courage to speak. People watched from doorways with the ache of those who want a spectacle they can condemn. An elder said too loudly, "A sign!" Another, "She drew it here." Shame burned. She pressed her palm to the mark until pain cleaned the moment. The alpha's voice cut the air. "Say her name with blame and you will eat your teeth." No one answered. He took her to the chapel under the hill, the oldest place. Stone remembers oaths, candles there never entirely die. He lit 3 wicks. For the living, for the wolves who had gone, for what stalks the border so the living lock their gates. "Why me?" she asked, voice small against stone. "There were other brides, better ones." "Because you were not made for lesser hands," he said, savage with love. "Because the first time I saw you, you wore hunger like a crown you did not know. Because you look at the world like it might forgive you, and I want to be the reason it never needs to." Her throat knotted. The candles shook though no wind moved. Cold drew a nail down her spine. The alpha's hand flattened over her nape in the same instant, furious that anything else had dared to touch even with air. A whisper slid through the wall. Not words at first, a taste, a pressure. Then syllables coiled like smoke around her name. "Ilara, Ilara, Ilara, little flame." The voice sounded like a century practicing her in the dark and finally daring to speak. Her knees weakened. The alpha stepped in front of her, shoulders lowered in the stance that ends arguments and wars. "Come take her," he said to the chapel's shadow, quiet and honest. "If you can." Frost filmed the rim of the offering bowl. The 3rd candle thinned, almost died, then caught again with a gasp like a living thing. She heard the vampire laugh without sound. It pressed on her lungs. Being seen crawled under her skin like a second heartbeat. He turned her face toward him. "Look at me." His pupils were wide, the blue a rim around Wolfdark. "Say what you know." "We are bound," she said. "Say the rest." "The bond is stronger than a shadow." "Good." He brushed his thumb over her lower lip. Shame became heat. Heat became the helplessness of loving something that would destroy anything trying to hurt you, even, if necessary, yourself. "He will try to shame you so you kneel. I will break him before you bend." They stayed until the candles shortened to fists of light. When they left, the mirror by the well was gone. In the morning, someone claimed a man carried it into the woods like a bride. By noon, 3 sheep lay bloodless in the field, 2 small mouths pressed into their throats as if the night had kissed them. The pack regarded her the way a jury regards a widow whose husband had been wealthy. She walked through their stairs with her head high and her hands steady. Inside, she folded around fear like paper around a blade. At sunset, she stood before the mirror in their room. The cloth lay folded beside it with more care than she remembered using. The alpha stood behind her, breath stirring her crown. "Ready?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I will not run." The mirror brightened. For a heartbeat, she saw herself as she hoped he saw her. Worthy, chosen, impossible to steal. Then red deepened in the glass, her reflection blinked with someone else's patience. And from the cold beyond the silver, the vampire made a promise shaped like a question, and her skin answered with fire. Night settled over the valley like a lid, holding in every breath that might have escaped her. Ilara stood on the threshold with her palm against the doorframe, feeling the wood faintly vibrate with the heartbeat of the house. Behind her, the alpha paced once, twice, a caged storm in a body that fit rage too well. He had ordered patrols doubled, torches banked, charms strung across every gate. He had kissed the mark at her throat until it ached with reassurance. None of it quieted the tremor under her skin. She told herself she could be steel. She told herself the vampire had no right to her name. She told herself the bond would hold because it had been sealed under a moon older than death. Then the air cooled, and the world shifted its weight. She did not see him arrive so much as she felt absence arrive first, the way a room changes when music stops. The torches outside leaned away from something that did not push them. The porch boards did not creak, yet pressure gathered against the door as if a tide were standing there and remembering how to flood. Her breath frosted. Her hand went numb against the frame. The Alpha was already moving. The bar lifted. The hinges groaned. Cold rode in like a rider. He stood there, the vampire whose gaze had made the yard a winter at noon. Pale, beautiful, terrible. He did not step across the threshold, but the night seemed to lean closer to hear him. Crimson rimmed his pupils like bleeding coins. Finally, he looked at Alara the way a name looks at the mouth that says it. "Little Flame," he said softly, "did they convince you were safe?" The Alpha's growl cut the air. "You will address me." "I am," the vampire replied without moving his eyes. "You are what keeps her on this side of the door." Alara swallowed. "Why are you here?" "Because I have practiced patience longer than your line has remembered its oaths." His smile was almost kind. "Because I marked you once and time returned you as promised." Her spine chilled. "You did not." "No." He lifted his hand, palm outward, not touching the threshold. Heat and cold branched through the air like rival lightning. When his fingers spread, the skin at Alara's throat burned beneath the Alpha's claim as if answering another buried brand. She gasped. The mark pulsed once, twice, and steadied. The Alpha's hand closed around her wrist. "Enough," the Alpha said, calm like a blade. "This is my territory. You are uninvited." "I need not enter," the vampire said. "Invitation is a courtesy among the living." His gaze softened in a way that hurt. "I learned you in darkness, Alara. I learned the shape you would wear when the century folded and let you through. Do not blame me for the hunger of a promise kept." "Leave," the Alpha said, "or I take your head and burn your heart." "Promises, promises," the vampire murmured, amused, and then he moved without moving. Alara felt it first as a pressure, then as heat tracing the scaffold of her bones, then as a touch that belonged to no hand. A phantom caress brushed her throat just left of the Alpha's mark, slid to her sternum, and settled over her heart as if a palm had been pressed through her ribs. Fire opened inside her like a grave in reverse. She staggered. The Alpha caught her with a curse. The bond surged to smother whatever burned, but the fire did not die. It braided itself through the bond until their shared heat trembled. Shame washed her like cold rain. She could not stop her body from answering the phantom. She hated that she could not. Tears spilled despite pride. "Do you feel how I remember you?" the vampire asked, almost tender. "Do you feel the century of wanting standing in the doorway?" The Alpha's eyes went wolf-dark. "Take your filth off her." The phantom hand withdrew, slow as cruelty. Lingering heat mapped Alara's skin in rails that would not cool. She tried to stand on her own. Her knees thought otherwise. He lifted her, and for a moment the world narrowed to his arms and the scent of leather and rain and command. She pressed her face to his collar and breathed like learning to live hurt less if done beside him. Outside, torches guttered. The vampire didn't blink. He looked like famine dressed as a man. "I will not breach your line tonight," he said. "But lines move, they always do. And when the moon is red again, I will collect what is mine." "She is not," the Alpha said, voice almost gentle in its certainty. "She never was." The vampire's gaze brightened and everything dimmed. For a moment, the village behind them seemed to lean, as if foundations had softened into mud. Alara felt doorways fill with watching, felt judgment gather like rain that chooses where to fall. She wanted to disappear. She wanted to be perfect for the one who held her. She wanted the other to stop saying her name like prayer. "Ask her," the vampire said. "Ask whether she felt me." The Alpha did not look away. "She feels only what I allow to touch her." That answer should have calmed the tremor inside her. It did and did not, like a melody losing a note and finding it again. The vampire's smile thinned. "I will teach you both what cannot be governed." He was gone without going. The cold remained, like a guest who had hidden a part of himself in the room and meant to return for it. Wind remembered how to move. Torches sighed with relief. The Alpha set her down with care. A man saves for precious things, and closed the door very softly, as if sound had teeth tonight. "Look at me," she did. The fury in him had a shape, not wild, not random. It pointed outward with the ferocity of oath. "Did he hurt you?" "Yes," she whispered, "but only because I hate that he can." The alpha's throat worked. He cannot. The mark, she touched where the phantom palm had rested. Heat lived there still, steady as a second pulse. It answered. It reacted. A correction, not a denial. What we are vows to answer challenge with strength. It is not desire. And if it was... The question fell out before she could catch it. Shame knifed through her. I'm sorry. He did not flinch. If it was, I would burn the part of the night that dared pretend it could replace me. He cupped her neck. And then I would claim you again until you forgot there had ever been anything but my hands. A sound escaped her, hurt, relief, want. She leaned into him until the heat under her skin unclenched. He kissed her brow like a benediction of possession. The bond steadied. But the village is a mouth. It must speak or choke. At dawn, women with baskets slowed at her gate. Men with rope coiled on shoulders paused to drink in the yard where there had never been thirst before. Someone chalked a sigil on the fence, half protective, half accusatory. Alara scrubbed it away with the heel of her hand until her skin burned. By midday, a cousin she had not seen since the choosing arrived with a face rehearsed for pity. Rumors, the cousin murmured. They say the mirror is not safe in your rooms. The mirror is covered, Alara said evenly. They also say he looked at you, the cousin added, with a glance that wanted confession more than it wanted truth. And that you looked back. Alara smiled the way a wound smiles when it scabs. Tell them I blinked. The cousin left with something to feed the street. Shame rose like tidewater. She gathered it in her fists and carried it to the training yard, where the alpha drilled with a ferocity that sanded the edges off the world. She joined him. He did not speak until the pattern between their sticks found its old conversation. Again, he said, and when she missed, again, and when her hands stung, again, until the ache inside her resembled the ache in her palms and both were almost manageable. After dusk, he took her to the watchtower. The valley spread below like a held breath. Patches of night lay heavier where pines clustered. He is old, the alpha said, not admiring it. Old things hate to be told no. Do old things love? She asked. Some of them think hunger is love, he said. Some of them call ownership destiny. I do not. What do you call it? Choice, he said, then softer, and vow. A bat skimmed the parapet and was gone. Alara pressed her elbows to stone and let the cold ground her. He said he marked me once, she murmured, before I was born. Vampires lie in long, beautiful sentences. What if he does? Then I will cut the sentence at the throat, he said, and you will watch it die and know which oath kept you. She should have laughed. Instead, she trembled because the heat under her skin had not left. In the glass of the tower slit, she saw her reflection murmur red at the edges. She closed her eyes. The phantom touch slid across her heart again, lighter, like a thought remembering itself, and her breath tripped. The alpha's hand was already over her sternum, burning through cloth. With me, he said, voice and order the world obeyed. Look at me. She did. The tremor slowed. The bond thrummed like a struck chord, sure despite the dissonance braided through it. He watched her until he was satisfied that what lived behind her ribs answered only him. That night she dreamed in mirrors. Corridors unfolded, silvered on both sides. In each, her reflection waited with a different patience. Some wore wolf eyes, some wore none. In the last, crimson bloomed where pupils should be, and when she lifted her palm to the glass, it was warmer than her own skin. A voice spoke from everywhere at once. Little flame, I will not make you kneel. I will make you choose. She woke with teeth digging into the inside of her cheek and blood tasting like iron vows. The alpha slept on his back with one arm flung across her waist, as if his body had learned the shape of guarding before his mind had decided to rest. She kissed the inside of his wrist where a vein beat, then slipped from bed to stand before the shrouded mirror. The cloth hung like a held breath. She lifted a corner. Her face peered back, pale, stubborn, trying to be braver than mourning. The heat under her skin flared in answer to nothing visible. You do not own me, she whispered to the glass. You never will. The door opened. Who are you speaking to? He asked kindly. Myself, she said, and meant it, and also did not. He came behind her and folded her into him until the shape of her fit his quiet. He touched the bond, he said into her hair. It will feel wrong until we starve his reach. How? By feeding you better than hunger can. He turned her, thumbed the dampness beneath her eye with a tenderness that hurt more than cruelty. By reminding your body whose name steadies your pulse. His mouth brushed the old mark, then pressed, then bit gently as if writing his vow into her again. Heat rushed through her, clean this time, claimed. The phantom fire recoiled like something that disliked competition. For an hour, the world behaved as if it remembered what morning is. The kitchen smelled of coffee and bread. A child outside laughed with the bravery of someone who trusts doors. Ilara let herself believe that the night had been an error, an experiment the dark would abandon. At noon, a parcel arrived wrapped in black cloth and tied with a ribbon the color of dried roses. No messenger waited. It sat on the step like a stray cat that knew the way back. The Alpha did not let her touch it. He opened it with a knife and found a single item inside. A mirror shard as long as a hand, edges ground smooth so it could be held without blood. The glass showed nothing at first. Then, as if learning to breathe, it fogged. Letters wrote themselves in the vapor, backward and clear. Did you feel me? The wordless sound he made would have frightened the sun if it had been closer. He wrapped the shard, snapped the ribbon, and put the bundle into the fire. The flame burned green for a breath. The scent was roses planted on graves. He turned to Ilara with his wolf sitting close in his eyes. You are not a question, he said. It sounded almost like he was arguing with the world. You are an answer. She wanted to be nothing else. She wanted never again to be the kind of woman who asked what if hunger was devotion. Yet heat lingered, and shame is an animal that returns to the door you feed it beside. She pressed her fingers to the old mark. It beat back beneath them, certain his. Night approached carrying red in its pocket. Patrols took their posts. Charms chimed at the gates. The Alpha set a chair by the window and did not pretend he would sleep. Ilara sat on the floor beside his knee, and when she closed her eyes, she saw a corridor full of mirrors waiting. She opened them so the last thing she would see, if darkness reached for her, was the man who had taught her what a vow could feel like when it chose to burn instead of fade. And when the air grew cold again and the house leaned toward the door, she lifted her chin and whispered the only truth she could bear to end the night with. That whatever touched her would find his name written first beneath her skin, unfinished, blazing. He did not finish the vow, and it burned inside her like an unending brand, a promise half-spoken and holy, still inescapable. Daylight did not banish the night, it only taught it to whisper. Ilara felt it in small ways, the way doors opened slower when she approached, the way laughter thinned on the green. The council bell tolled. Wolves drifted toward the square with the curiosity of villagers who smell smoke and story. Ilara walked with her spine straight, counting breaths as if were prayer beads. The Alpha went beside her, a weather front. Rumor moved faster than he did. She invited it, someone murmured. Blood listens to blood. An Alpha's bride should not answer when darkness calls. Shame rose like heat in a closed room. The elders stood under the ash. Lysander waited at the Alpha's shoulder, jaw set. The crowd rippled back when the Alpha lifted his hand. He looked at the pack as if they were a problem he could still love. Speak, he said. Mara, an old she-wolf, stepped forward. We honor the bond, she began, but mirrors have breathed where breath does not belong. Sheep lay like empty wineskins. Children wake with cold in their mouths. We fear the night has found an open door in our house. Ilara swallowed iron. I did not open anything, she said. The door knocked itself. A hunter barked a laugh. And the mark on your throat, does it burn for two? Lysander took one step that sounded like a verdict. The Alpha didn't move, but the crowd flinched anyway. You will not speak to her in that manner, he said. Then we will speak to you, an elder called. We ask for protection, Alpha. We ask for proof that our Luna's heart beats only to your oath. Proof? The word sat like a coin on her tongue. She could not spit it without paying. What proof would satisfy your cowardice? The Alpha asked softly. The old scouring, Mara said, not meeting Ilara's eyes. Kneel beneath the ash. Let the smoke pass over her. If the night laid claim, it will lift. If the bond is true, it will blaze. Ilara had watched it once as a child and thought it was what justice looked like when it forgot it had hands. Lysander whispered, "No." The alpha's knuckles whitened. Ilara breathed the way he'd taught her, in for loyalty, out for pride. "I will kneel," she said. The ice in the alpha's eyes melted enough to show the fire beneath. "You owe them nothing." "I owe you ease," she said. "If my humiliation buys an hour without their whispers, I can afford it." He swore but would not command her out of it. "If they hurt you," he said, "I will salt the roots of this tree with their names." They prepared the old brazier. Smoke like burned honey climbed the air. The pack formed a circle with the appetite of spectators who claim morality as a side dish. Ilara stepped into the center, folded her knees to the dirt, and pressed her hands to her thighs because her palms wanted to shake. The first wash of smoke was merely scent. The second stung, searching her mouth and nostrils like a cruel midwife. The third slid cold under her skin, prying at doors she could not name. She kept her gaze on the alpha's boots, scuffed leather, ash-flecked, planted as if he were prepared to hold the whole square by himself. "Name your bond," Myra intoned. "Ilara to Kale," she said, and the mark at her throat pulsed in answer. "Name the night that seeks you." To name is to admit shape, she thought, but said. "A vampire who thinks hunger is destiny." The fourth smoke passed, her vision stitched red at the edges. "Do you reject him?" an elder asked. Heat surged behind her ribs like an argument rehearsed by someone else, and shame scorched her tongue at the speed with which her body remembered the phantom touch. She wanted to promise she would never shiver at anything but the alpha's hands again. "I reject him," she said, and her voice broke like a branch. "I reject him, I reject him." The smoke ringed her head like a crown that did not love its queen. Something in the ash hissed. "Enough," the alpha said. He moved, and the circle found places to not be. He lifted her by the elbow as if the earth had lost the right to hold her. "You have had your spectacle." Mara's eyes shone, not cruel now, only weary. "We needed to see." "Then look," he said, and touched Ilara's mark with his thumb. The bond rose like lightning. Heat flashed through her. The crowd felt it, a collective breath caught. "Does the night answer when I claim what is mine?" Silence. Shame shifted to relief, then back to shame, because she had needed him to save her moment. He set her on her feet. "If you call my Luna cursed again," he told the square, "I will make a new law that requires teeth to speak." The alpha turned toward the tree line as if listening to something only rage could hear. "He is near," he said. "He thinks our humiliation is a feast." Ilara touched his sleeve. "Do not go alone." "I will not," he said. "I will take every man who doubted you and teach them what doubt tastes like when the dark chews back." They left the square's murmurs. In the quiet of the house, humiliation returned like a tide waiting outside the doorframe. She sank onto the edge of the bed and stared at her hands until they were only shapes without virtue. "I should have been stronger," she said. "You were," he answered. "Strength is not the absence of trembling. It is kneeling when you could run and rising when they want you to stay down." "I wanted them to love me," she admitted. "Then they will learn," he said, "or they will leave." He crouched, large and careful, and set his forehead against her knees. "I will end him for touching what is mine." She threaded her fingers into his hair and felt both the man and the beast breathing under her hands. Guilt flooded in, hot and stubborn. "If I had not been chosen, he would not have come." "If you had not been chosen," he said, lifting his face, "I would have burned the world anyway. Do not credit fate with my sins." A tap sounded at the window. The alpha was at the casement before the second knock. Nothing waited there but a single red petal, wet and stuck to the glass. He peeled it away with a growl that sounded like a promise to a grave. That night the pack's warning howls ringed the house like a fence made of breath and fear. Ilara lay still and counted them, each one a reminder of the ash, the smoke, the kneel that stole and steadied her. Near midnight, she rose for water. The mirror's cloth had slipped. She pulled it straight and saw, for a pulse, her reflection on its knees beneath the ash, smoke curling like a leash from her mouth to unseen hands. She blinked and saw only herself, standing, breathing, holding the life that would be hers if she could learn to be as unforgiving as love. The alpha came up behind her and wrapped his heat around her like a sentence that refuses a period. "They will not shame you again," he whispered. "I will teach them new words." "What if the word I deserve is still the old one?" she asked. His mouth moved against her hair. "Then I will live in their throats until they choke on it," he said, and the vow did not finish. It burned, unended, under her skin like a brand that refused to cool. He took her into his arms as if the night itself had to be wrestled away from her body. Elara felt the world shrink to heat, leather, and the steady drum of his heart. When he set his mouth to the mark at her throat, the bond answered like struck metal, ringing until her bones hummed. "Mine," he said, not as theft but as a vow returned. His voice carried iron filings, her skin turned magnet. She thought of the ash and of knees on dirt while eyes tallied her shame. "Kale," she whispered, because his name steadied rooms. "They will keep whispering." "They may whisper until their tongues tire," he said. "They will run out of breath before I run out of hands." His thumb traced her jaw as if mapping a border he refused to surrender. "Look at me." She did. Winter lived in his eyes, fire beneath. He kissed her, slow, possessive, a prayer rewritten with teeth. Want rose like tide. Under it, cold-threaded, the memory of a phantom palm over her heart. She stiffened, hatting herself for it. He felt it. His mouth left hers. He watched her like weather. "Where does he sit?" he asked softly. "Which corner believes him?" "None," she said too fast. The lie clipped itself on her teeth. "I'm trying." "You are doing," he corrected. "Trying is for excuses." He bared her throat and pressed his teeth to the old mark until heat climbed. "You need the truth to burn louder than echoes." He carried her to the wall where the moon cut a window of red. He set her wrists above her head, not to bind but to remind. "Tell me the vow," he murmured. "That I belong to you," she said. "And I to you," he answered over her skin. Bond etched in blood and soul, not traded, not replaced. Each touch reset the room until North pointed to him. Yet the air cooled between kisses, as if a breath from the mirror crossed the floor. She felt watched by a patience that never slept. "He stands where shame stands," Kale said. "Behind your shoulder, wearing your doubt." "Then take it off me," she said, half plea, half dare. He smiled without softness. "Gladly." He unmade her fear the way a storm unthreads heat from a field, thorough, intent, inevitable. His hands were liturgy, his voice a growl poured over her nerves. "Breathe! Hold! Mine!" The bond blazed, and for a while the world narrowed to two names exchanging the same vow. In that narrowing lived a new quiet, not absence, but the hush of something waiting in the hall. Later, when candles had shortened, and the hearth had fallen to a seam of red, she lay against him and counted the beats under his ribs. "Do you love me beyond rage?" she asked into his skin. "I love you into rage," he said, "until rage is the only language the dark understands." "Will you forgive me if I shake?" "I will forgive you when you lie," he said. "Shaking I will keep." He tilted her chin. "Shaking proves the vow still moves." She swallowed. "He said he will collect me when the moon is red again." "Then the moon will learn it is not a debt collector." His mouth curved with a cruelty that comforted her. "It is a witness. Witnesses can be blinded." Fog smeared the window. She would have slept, but a curve of cold along her spine wrote a different future. She sat up. Kale's hand caught her hip. "What do you feel?" "Breath," she said, "on the wrong side of the glass." He lifted the cloth from the mirror like a priest unveiling a relic. For a heartbeat, it showed only the two of them, the red window, the ordinary miracle of a bed. Then the silver shivered. Her reflection's pupils darkened to wine. A vapor haloed the glass from within. Kale stepped between her and the mirror, but the gaze bent around him like wire. It found her shoulder. She felt touch where no hand stood. Heat salted into her skin, precise, a brand drawn with a lover's restraint. "No," Cale said softly, and his wolf rode the word. He pressed his palm to the glass. Frost spidered outward under his heat. The mirror flared red, then went briefly black, an eye closing. When it cleared, she saw only herself again, small and fierce. He replaced the cloth. He will learn the distance between looking and taking. "I should be stronger," she whispered. "You should be alive," he said. "You should be mine. Everything else is detail." He gathered her and sat with his back to the headboard, caging her again. "Say the vow." "I belong to you." "And I to you," he said, voice roughening with a prayer he would never admit. "Say more." "I will not kneel to him," she said. "You will not kneel to anyone," he answered. "And if you must, you will kneel on my hands." He kissed her wrist where fear went to drink. "Let the pack keep their ash, I will keep your name." Morning arrived gray and undecided. The village made a busy show of forgetting. Children practiced bravery by smiling. Elders watched like locksmiths measuring a door for a bolt. By noon, he sent runners to the borders. Wards were laid like nets. On the training ground, he turned his body into a lesson about hunting a thing that prefers you ashamed. She matched him until pride found steadier legs. After, behind the storehouse, he turned her to the wall and wrote their history down her spine with his palm. "You are not small," he said. "You are not stray. You are not a place the night can rest." "What am I?" "My answer," he breathed. "My appetite, my ruin if I am lucky, my crown if I am worthy." "Your ruin." "Let me love you until I deserve the word," he said. "Then we will correct it." She laughed, brief and broken in a way that mended something. He caught the sound with his mouth. The kiss deepened until the world narrowed again. Toward dusk, a bell rang crooked. The watch at the eastern ridge had seen movement. He strapped on knives and a will older than steel. "I'm coming," she said. "You are staying," he answered. "Bar the door, do not speak to mirrors. Say the vow until your mouth forgets any other sentence." She placed her hand over his heart. "Return to me." "I will not leave you," he said. "Even when I go, I do not go." He left with Lysander and 10 men. The house, deprived of his gravity, felt light and strange. The cloth on the mirror lifted once and fell. She did not look. The first howl came as the sky stained. It announced an argument that would end with burial or fire. The second howl braided into the first. She pressed her fist to her mouth and tasted salt she had not earned. When the door opened, she was already moving. Cale entered with blood on his sleeve that was not his and patience stripped to bone. "What did you find?" "Tracks," he said. "Cold where there should be none. Mirrors hung in trees at face height." His mouth twisted. "He wants you to see yourself until you doubt which look belongs to you." "I know my look," she said. "It is the one that chooses you." "Then hold it," he said. He stepped into her, heat reasserting law. He lifted her again, not to undo what fear had written, but to overwrite it until language forgot any other claim. "Say the vow." She set it into his mouth. He answered with the same sentence like 2 hands tying one knot. Outside, the night pressed its face to the windows. Inside, his voice roughened like burnished iron drawn across silk, and every kiss tasted haunted because a breath she did not want still lived between them. And still she clung, and still he marked, and still the vow burned without finishing. A brand promising more than it could spend in one lifetime, an unfinished heat that would not cool. And still the mirror waited behind cloth, like a mouth not closing, like a question she could not stop asking, like a vow he refused to finish. Night learned her name and began to use it like a key. Ilara lay beneath its turning, listening to the rafters breathe, to ember red settle into ash, to the hush that came before a whisper. Cale slept with one arm over her waist, a human lock on a door the dark kept testing. She should have felt safe. Instead, she felt a patient tide press against her skin as if the sea had discovered her pulse. "Little flame," it said, not with sound but with pressure beneath thought. "Do you know what it is to stop fearing time? Do you know what it is to watch shame shrink until it vanishes because centuries wear down everything that tries to hurt you? Come where hours break like waves and leave you shining. She kept her eyes open until they burned. She held Cale's wrist and counted his pulse. The whisper did not tire. You kneel before wolves who mistake smoke for law. Let me give you a throne no cinder can touch. No, she breathed into the pillow. Cale stirred. His thumb found her mark and pressed. The bond warmed. For a span, the tide receded. Sleep took her like an undertow. In the dream, the forest wore a ceiling of red glass. Mirrors hung at her height. In each, a different Alara waited, the child with ash-smudged knees, the girl at the choosing, the woman with the mark burning like sunrise under skin. Their mouths moved with the same words she could not hear. Through the mirrors walked the vampire with a patience that did not hurry because eternity does not run. His eyes were coins minted from dusk and blood. He did not reach for her, and the refusal was its own kind of touch. You have worn humiliation like a borrowed cloak, he said. Let us burn the tailor. He lifted a hand. The mirrors unhooked and drifted like lanterns. Each reflected a version of her who had never been told to kneel. Alara watched herself crowned, untouchable, a mouth that would never tremble when names were thrown like stones. What would you give for that freedom? He asked without moving his lips. A single lifetime, your fear. My bond, she said, and the word smoked as it left her mouth. It is not a coin. He smiled the way ruins smile when ivy makes them beautiful. Little flame, he said, I do not want the bond burned. I want it widened. Wolves speak of always as if it is a road. I speak of always as a room. Bring your vow into the house of time and it will stop aging into guilt. I will not leave him, she said, even in dreams. I am not asking you to leave, he said. I am asking you to stop being left by every hour that passes. The mirrors circled. One showed Cale pressing his brow to her knees while the pack pretended not to watch. Another showed the ash ceremony. Smoke curled from her mouth like a leash. A third showed her older, hands empty, eyes full of forgiving she did not feel. Her throat tightened until breath cost more than she could pay. He came nearer. Cold around him felt like rest, like a fever finally breaking. You are afraid your shame will rot the devotion you carry. It will not, if devotion is lifted from time. Let me teach your body to stop forgetting what it means to be chosen. He did not touch her. He let the idea of touch brush the inch above her skin. Heat rose, precise and achingly clean, and her body answered because bodies answer truth they do not yet recognize as danger. The bond surged. Cale's presence rushed in like a tide thrown by a different moon. The heat did not vanish. It braided. Alara cried out and woke with her own hand over her mouth. The room held its breath. Cale's eyes were already on her, wolf-dark. Tell me, he said. She counted 3 heartbeats and let the 4th be words. He said I could live where shame can't follow. Cale's jaw set like a door barred against siege. Shame can be hunted. It does not need immortality to die. He offered not dying. She hated how small it sounded. He offered to make always into a room. If a cage has silk walls, Cale said, does it cease to cage? He sat up, gathered her so her heart could hear the argument inside his. Listen. He pressed her palm to his sternum. This is always, not because it lasts forever, but because it chooses you every time it beats. The whisper found another seam. You could carry his heart into centuries, it said. You could keep him from ending. Let me lift him beyond the reach of doubt and graves. Let me show you what devotion feels like when it does not count how many mornings are left. She shivered. He wants me to make you a promise I cannot keep. Then do not try, Cale said. Make the promise you can. He kissed her knuckles. His mouth was warm with a vow he wore like armor. Promise that when you shake, you will shake in my hands. Mirrors had been a game the night played without rules. By noon, the village made the game a festival of concern. Women arrived with charms that looked like kindness and worked like surveillance. Men set silver nails in thresholds. An elder poured a circle of salt at the bed and called it safety as if safety were a line you could draw and then live inside. Alara endured and smiled. When they left, shame went room to room in her ribs, pinching wicks to test how easily light died there. Cale returned from the ridge with orders he had swallowed. "He is not hiding," he said. "He is rehearsing." Deer lay in the orchard with their eyes closed and smiles on their faces. Smiles. Whatever wears his voice taught their muscles to mimic peace. He stilled a shudder. "He practices on anything that will listen. I cannot forgive the practicing." That afternoon, Alara slept in the chair by the window with the cloth tight over the mirror and a knife in her lap she did not know how to throw. The dream took her to the chapel where candles confessed to fear. The vampire stood beside the bowl of water. It steamed, though cold coiled around everything else. "Immortality is not a crown," he said. "It is a river. Come further and the shore where they humiliated you will look smaller than a fingernail." "I am not small," she said. "He says so." "I know what he says. I want to give you the luxury of never having to prove it again." The water cleared. She saw herself holding a child whose eyes were old and kind. The ache was so sudden she forgot to be wary. "What is this?" "Possibility," he said. "Time enough to carry love without breaking your back beneath it. Time enough to be forgiven without forgiving those who earned nothing but your absence. Time enough to stop choosing between being a bride and being a queen." "You talk like you can write laws," she said. "I talk like I can keep a door open longer than a night," he said. He turned his face so she could see the cost of centuries, a sorrow as bright as cruelty. "I can keep you from watching love thin under so many days that even vows begin to fray." She reached toward the water. Heat met her fingers, sweet as recognition. The bond surged again. Cale's name rose in her throat like a shield she had swallowed. She woke with tears on her face and Cale's hands bracketing her skull. "Look at me," he said. "Say it." "I belong to you." The words landed like anchors dropped from a burning ship. "He keeps showing me versions of us that don't end." "Ending is not the enemy," Cale said. "Ending is the honor paid to a life that was spent, not hoarded." He swallowed, then gave her what cost him. "If I am given 20 winters with you, I would not trade one for 1,000 in a room where you forget how to want." She folded around that sentence like a hand around a flame. It intends to carry through wind. At dusk, the rim of the moon reddened. Patrol calls braided. Torches stood like arguments. Alara followed Cale to the threshold. "You will stay inside," he said. "I will not kneel inside," she answered. "I will stand and hate the door." "Hate the door," he said, aching. He kissed her once, twice, a third time as if building her breath like a wall he could leave behind. "If you hear him, call me, not him." He left her with the knife and a room that smelled like iron and pine and vows. Minutes lengthened into wire. The whisper arrived as if it had only stepped away to wet its throat. "Do you know what it is to sleep without fear?" it asked. "Do you know what it is to hold your lover and know you will never be old or lost in his arms? I offer you rest from clocks. Let me unteach the sound of bells tolling for what you love." She pressed her palms to her ears and heard him anyway. She whispered Cale's name until it was a rosary. The fire thinned to coals. The mirror hummed behind the cloth like a wheel about to turn. The latch clicked. "Alara," Cale called, steady and low. She moved toward the door and froze when a second Alara answered from the yard, perfect and laughing. Little flame open. Her hand refused, fury won. "No," she said to both voices. "No to you, yes to him." Cale entered like a storm. He saw the cloth quiver and went to it. He pulled it down, pressed his palm to the silver, and said, in a voice that made the wood remember its roots, "Listen." The mirror blackened, reddened, then showed only the room, the two of them, and the knife she set down. "He cannot ask what you do not answer," Cale said. "He cannot take what you do not give." "I hate that I listen," she said. "Then let me give you something louder." He kissed her until thinking backed away from the door. "When he whispers, hear this instead," he said, mouth at her mark. She breathed like someone pulled from deep water. The night pressed its face to the panes. The whisper learned to wait. She drew Cale after her like a net and chose the sea with her name on it. When sleep returned, There were no mirrors, only a field where Dawn walked barefoot toward her. Still, somewhere behind the glass of the world, a patient mouth shaped her name and promised a forever that did not end. And when she woke, Kale saw the shadow it left and held her as if holding were the only vow strong enough to keep a question from becoming an answer she could never unmake. A vow he did not finish and she could not stop hearing. He had always guarded her, but when the blood moon began to fatten, Kale's vigilance hardened into ritual. He walked the perimeter before dawn, smeared resin on the lintel, set iron where shadows pooled. He braided her hair with red thread as if the night might try to pick a lock made of strands. When they stepped outside, he moved with her like a second spine. "You do not step where I have not already bled," he said, half promise, half order. Alara felt safer and smaller at once. The village watched, safety with bright, frightened eyes. At noon, he inked sigils on her wrists, ash and salt that drank light. "Anchors," he said, kissing each one. "If he pulls, hold these." "What if I want to run toward you?" she asked. "Then you will not have to run at all," he said. The vampire did not knock. He came in pauses, in the quiet between breaths. He made the house listen to itself until the floorboards forgot which groans were theirs. When Alara closed her eyes, he stood inside the black, patient as tide. "You are not meant for a village that treats awe like suspicion, little flame," he told her. "Let me take you where wonder is forgiven." She answered with Kale's name until her throat ached. The whisper slid sideways and waited. Lysander found Kale in the yard breaking staffs. "You are frightening the pack." "I am teaching them what frightens me," Kale said. "They may be reassured by my rage." "Obsession makes poor guardrails." "Obsession makes walls," Kale said. "I am building a city out of her name." Twilight lifted the moon, red bruising into gold. Kale came behind Alara at the window and fitted himself around her like a bracket. "Say the vow," he murmured. She did. The glass fogged. He took her to the chapel. "Stone remembers," he said, pressing his mouth to the ink until the sigils warmed. "Mine." "You cannot keep me safe by keeping me smaller," she said. "I can keep you alive by keeping you closer," he answered. "When this is over, I will open every door you name. While it lasts, I will be the door." She kissed him. The bond flared. The vampire breathed through the wall and turned heat to wine. "Do you see how your love works only when watched?" he asked. "Come learn what devotion feels like when it does not need witnesses." "She does not need you," Kale said to the empty, and the empty smiled. Alara felt the smile like cloth dragged lightly across a bruise. That night she dreamed tides in her body, two predators swimming them, a wolf made of dawn and a man made of midnight. Each wanted her shore. She woke with Kale's teeth at her throat where love had written its argument. The moon swelled. Kale shadowed her from well to oven, from yard to threshold. He did not think of it as caging. He thought of it as standing between her and appetite. His hand at her hip in the market claimed perimeter. "Alara needs air," Lysander said when the sky sat heavy with weather. "She will breathe through it," Kale said. Between road and bed, he found places on her skin to reopen with heat. Collarbone, wrist, the small valley where pulse admits fallibility, until doubt had fewer teeth. The whisper taught her new hunger, promising the ache under devotion could become an instrument, not a wound. "Come where terror is a spice, not a diet," it said. "Come where desire is not punished by mornings." "What does he offer?" Kale asked when she startled at shadows. "Permission," she said before she could stop. "To stop apologizing for being wanted." His face emptied of everything but intent. He set her hand over his heart. "If the pack taught you to apologize for being wanted, I will make them kneel until the habit leaves their bones. You do not say sorry for being the reason I breathe." He did not hunt the vampire that evening. He stayed and marked her again with ink and with teeth. He drew a sigil over her heart, wolf lines meeting moon curve, and filled the lines with heat until she gasped. "Anchor," he said. The vampire answered with a phantom ring of cold around her ankle, like a chain made of winter. For a heartbeat, she wanted to step into the dark just to stop choosing. She admitted it, and hated herself for the honesty. Kale kissed the shame out of her mouth. "Wanting rest is not betrayal," he said. "Let me be where you rest." The moon rose monstrous and kind. Near midnight, the wards chimed like spoons on glass. Mirrors hidden in trees began to hum. Wolves on the ridge howled and fell silent as if a hand had closed around their throats. Kale was at the door. Alara felt the wood flinch. He turned back and pressed his brow to hers. "If I hunt him, I leave you. If I stay, I let him hunt us both." "Stay," she said. "Let him see what he cannot take." They waited together. The humming swelled. The mirror's cloth rose as if a breath beneath it rehearsed kissing. "Come to the border, little flame," the vampire asked. "Only to look. Bring your protector if you must." Kale took her hand. "We go only where I draw the line," he said, and drew it with salt and iron and old words. They walked to the field's edge where stubble glittered red. There the night had laid a circle of frost, perfect as a coin. The vampire stood opposite, not inside, not outside, but in the part of the world that refuses geometry. He bowed as if the century had taught him manners. "Do you tire of kneeling?" he asked Alara. "Do you tire of cherishing your cage?" "She has no cage," Kale said. "She has a kingdom." "And yet," the vampire murmured, eyeing the marks on her wrists like settings. Alara stepped so the salt line kissed her boots. "Speak plainly." "Very well," he said. "I want you because wanting you has been the only honest work I've done since the plague burned my name from history. It is not virtue. It is hunger educated by time. Come, and your shame will become a story you tell to children who cannot believe such small cruelties once existed." Kale laughed once, without humor. "He offers you amnesia and calls it mercy." "I offer the luxury of remembering only what deserves to be remembered," the vampire said. Her bones shook with the pull of two worlds. Kale's hand crushed hers. The vampire spread his fingers. Heat and cold braided up her spine until her body answered both with the honesty that makes betrayal feel like weather. "Choose," the vampire said gently, as if he were kind. "I already did," she said, and turned her face to Kale, because a choice is a direction, not a speech. He kissed her in the red field, inside the circle he had drawn under a sky fat with omen. It was not gentle. It was an oath nailed to the door of her mouth. The vampire watched and smiled and did not vanish. When the kiss broke, the cold ring at her ankle tightened. The ink over her heart burned. Two brands, two empires, one body trying to be loyal to both gravity and flame. She leaned and did not fall because Kale's arm was a law the night did not yet know how to break. They left the border with his gaze on their backs like a second moon. In the house, Kale locked every lock and then stood with his hands useless, as if the only lock that mattered lived under her skin. "Tell me what to do," he said. "I will do it." "Stay," she answered, the smallest command, the hardest work. He stayed. He watched her sleep and did not close his eyes. She dreamed of two thrones and a crown that burned whoever held it. She woke with Kale's name in her mouth and the whisper curling under it, and between the two her heart learned to ache like something torn and threaded at once. And when the blood moon slid lower and shadows thinned, the hurt did not end. It settled, bright and unfinished, like a vow refusing its last word. Smoke came before dawn. Thick and acrid, it clung to the valley as if the forest itself had exhaled death. Alara stood at the threshold, Kale's cloak around her shoulders, and watched a red bruise of fire glow against the tree line. Wolves howled in the distance, desperate, broken sounds that belonged not to hunters, but to prey. The vampire had moved. Kale's second returned at first light, ash streaking his arms. 3 villages gone, Lysander said grimly. Fields salted by frost that burned when touched. The river runs black where it crosses his path. The council gathered by the ash tree. This time, the arrogance was gone. The same elders who had demanded Alara kneel beneath smoke now shifted like guilty children. They spoke of omens. They spoke of curses too old to resist. Not one spoke of her by name, yet every glance angled toward her mark. She felt it, the weight of their regret, brittle and late. Mara, who had lit the brazier during the scouring, bowed her head. "Luna," she said, voice thinned by smoke, "we were wrong to doubt you, wrong to doubt the Alpha's choice. You bore humiliation for us." Alara's lips curved, but not in forgiveness. "You carved humiliation into me," she said. "You used my knees as your altar and called it faith." "We feared." "You feared being wrong," she snapped. The fire in her throat surprised even her. "And so you gave me to the flame of your cowardice. Now you bring me Ash's apology." The Alpha's presence towered behind her, unspoken but heavy. His silence was a blade angled at their shame. Another elder tried. "Forgive us, stand with us as queen. The vampire bleeds us all." Alara met his gaze, steady as stone. "Forgiveness is a door you nailed shut. Do not weep at the lock when fire eats your roof." The crowd lowered their eyes. Only Kale's hand on her shoulder kept her from shaking. That night the valley glowed like coal. The vampire did not hunt with fangs, he hunted with fury. Forests kindled where his shadow fell. Wolves returned maimed, eyes gone glassy with horrors they could not name. And still, the whispers reached her window. "Little flame, you suffer for those who made you bleed. Come where regret does not follow, where you need not be queen to wolves who only learned reverence when their fields turned to cinder." She pressed her hands to her ears, but the voice lived under her skin. Kale found her curled against the wall, nails digging crescent moons into her palms. He knelt, forcing her eyes up to his. "Say it," he growled. "Say whose name steadies you." "Yours," she gasped. "Always yours." He kissed her palms, pried her fists open, and placed his mouth to each raw crescent. "They will learn too late. That is their burden. Yours is only this: survive me." But survival felt heavier than forgiveness. At dawn, smoke painted the horizon black. Families fled to the stronghold, bringing little but ash in their hair. Alara walked among them. Children stared at her as though she were both curse and salvation. Mothers whispered blessings through cracked lips. Men dropped their eyes in shame. "Luna," one whispered, falling to his knees. "Forgive us, we were blind." Her steps did not pause. She thought of the ash tree, of the smoke curling like a leash from her mouth. She thought of Kale's hand pulling her up. "Blindness is a choice," she said coldly. "You chose it when I begged for sight." He wept into the dirt. She did not look back. That night the vampire painted the sky with fire again. Kale held her at the border of the stronghold, watching their world burn. "They will regret until their tongues split," he said. "But regret does not feed us. Only rage will." Alara leaned into him, her heart divided between terror and fury. "Do you hate them?" "I hate wasting you on their weakness," he said. His teeth grazed her throat, claim written in fire. "But I will use their regret as kindling when I tear him down." She closed her eyes and let the heat of his vow steady her. Behind her lids, crimson eyes waited, patient. And in her chest, forgiveness felt as impossible as freedom, an unopened door in a burning house. And when the vampire's whisper threaded through the crack in her heart again, she realized that regret from her pack was nothing beside obsession from a monster who refused to stop, and her choice would never be about forgiveness, only about which fire she would burn in. Alara woke to the sound of her own heartbeat, louder than dawn. It echoed in her ears like drums before war. She pressed a hand to her stomach, meaning only to calm the storm inside her ribs, and felt it. A flutter so small it could have been imagined, yet undeniable in its weight. Something stirred where silence had always reigned. She froze, breath stalled. Her body, once hers alone, now trembled with the whisper of another. For a long time she sat at the edge of the bed with Kale's cloak draped around her, staring at her palm pressed to her belly. She thought of the scouring, of smoke testing her veins. She thought of mirrors blooming red with someone else's patience. She thought of vows bitten into skin until they burned. Now her own flesh carried a secret heavy enough to break kingdoms. The door opened. Kale filled the frame, tall, storm-blooded, and ruthless. His eyes, always quick to find her, narrowed at once. "What is it?" She turned her face. "Nothing." He crossed the room in 2 strides, catching her chin between his thumb and finger. "Your scent changes when you lie." His nose brushed her hair, his mouth at her temple. "Tell me." Her voice shook. "There is something inside me." For a heartbeat, silence turned the air to glass. Then his hands caught her waist as though she might slip through time. His breath thundered against her neck. "Mine," he said, half growl, half prayer. "Our bond writes in blood, Alara. No shadow can cede what my vow already owns." Her eyes burned. "But he touched me. He claimed he had waited centuries." Cale's grip tightened until his knuckles blanched. "Then let him wait another eternity gnawing on his hunger. This child is not his. It is ours. Mine, say it." She wanted to believe him, but the memory of phantom fire lingered. At night, when whispers wound through her bones, she sometimes felt the vampire's voice settle in her womb, a murmur of inheritance. "Little flame, you carry proof of me. Carry my air." Cale saw her flinch. Fury lit his veins. "He will not steal fatherhood from me. He will not name what is mine." He pressed his palm flat against her stomach, reverent and savage. The bond leapt, bright and hot. For a moment, the flutter inside her stilled as if listening. "This is hope," Cale said fiercely. "Not hunger. Wolves will see dawn in these eyes, not red but blue." Yet when she closed her eyes, crimson glowed in the dark. Words spread before she spoke it aloud. Wolves have ways of smelling destiny before it is confessed. Women passed her in the market with soft eyes now, their mouths bent in sympathy or awe. Men bowed their heads, murmuring Luna, as if the word meant both mother and queen. For Alara, their sudden reverence rang hollow. Where had this devotion been when she knelt humiliated beneath the ash? Where had it been when whispers chewed her name raw? Now they looked at her womb and saw prophecy, not woman. Mara approached her by the well, voice hushed. "Air," she said, almost reverent. "Forgive us for doubting. You carry our salvation." Alara's laugh cut sharp. "Salvation," her hand drifted to her belly. "Or battlefield." Mara paled and had no answer. That night, Alara dreamed of cradling a child. But the child's face shifted between Cale's fierce blue eyes and the vampire's crimson glow. Each time she tried to kiss its brow, it blurred, turning to smoke in her hands. She woke weeping into Cale's chest. He held her until her sobs fractured. "Do not let him in," Cale whispered. "The bond writes truth, not the mirror. What stirs inside you answers me. Feel it." She placed her hand over his and pressed them both to her belly. For a moment, stillness reigned. Then the flutter came again, stronger. Cale's lips curved into something like worship. "Mine," he whispered into her hair. "Ours." But later, as she drifted back into uneasy sleep, a phantom voice curled through her veins. "Our heir, Alara, born of hunger and fire, a child of 2 empires. You know the truth because your body trembles." The vampire's presence grew bolder with each rising moon. Wolves on the borders returned with bloodless throats. Smoke curled from wells where water should have been, and always his whispers sought her belly. Cale's obsession turned ruthless. He shadowed her every step, guarding her like a treasure stolen and won. He would not let her draw water alone. He stood behind her at council, hand on her shoulder, daring anyone to doubt her again. When whispers reached the pack that the heir inside her might not be wolf-born, Cale bared his teeth before them all. "Say it," he roared. "Say whose child this is. Say whose vow still burns on her skin." No one answered. Fear had learned to kneel. Alara bowed her head. Shame knifed her throat, because though her lips whispered ours, her heart still carried the memory of fire not Cale's. By the next blood moon, forests lay charred. Wolves who once doubted now begged Cale for salvation. He gave them war instead. Alara watched from the stronghold as Cale returned bloodied but unbroken, his hands trembling only when they touched her belly. His lips pressed to her skin, desperate. "He cannot have you," he vowed. "He cannot have what you carry." She whispered, "But what if the child carries him?" Cale's eyes burned. "Then I will teach the child which name steadies the pulse." That night the vampire came closer. She woke to frost painting the inside of the glass. When she touched it, heat spread into her palm, down her arm, and settled low in her belly like a brand. The stir inside her answered, not with fear but recognition. "Little flame," he whispered, "do not lie to yourself. You already know whose air quickens inside you. I have waited centuries for this blood to return. You will not deny me." She staggered, hand clutched around her stomach. Cale woke instantly, pulling her into him. "What did he say?" Her tears wet his collar. "He claims the child is his." Cale's wolf roared so loud the windows trembled. He seized her hand and pressed it hard against his chest. "Listen, the heartbeat you carry inside you is mine because it beats with mine. He is hunger, nothing more. Hunger does not seed destiny. Love does." But when she closed her eyes, she felt both. Hunger and love, braided into one trembling flutter. At dawn, the pack gathered at the ash. They looked at her with awe now, no longer doubt. "Our Luna carries hope," Mara declared. "She is the vessel of salvation." Alara looked at their eager faces and tasted bitterness. "You call me queen now because my body carries what you want. You crown me only when I bleed for you." Mara tried to answer, but Alara raised her voice, trembling. "Do not kneel now. You already taught me how much the earth hurts." The pack lowered their heads, regret thick as fog. But regret could not build forgiveness. She returned to the house, Cale following close, a storm inside his stride. He turned her, pressed his forehead to hers. "Do not listen to them. Do not listen to him. Listen to me." Her voice cracked. "What if destiny never asked me?" "Then I will argue with destiny," Cale growled, "and I will win." That night, as the blood moon swelled, Alara felt the child move again. Stronger, clearer. Her tears fell onto her hands. Her womb had become war ground, wolves calling it hope, a vampire whispering air, and an alpha branding it treasure. She lay between them, trembling, caught between hunger and vow. And in the silence, the child stirred again, as if already learning the cruel truth, that being born of love and shadow meant never escaping either. And when Cale kissed her stomach with desperate devotion, she felt another kiss phantom through her veins, and knew that fate had already chosen her body to be the battlefield neither alpha nor vampire would surrender. The blood moon rose swollen and red, fat with omen, casting the valley in a glow that felt more like blood than light. The stronghold walls quivered with every howl beyond the ridges. Wolves bristled along the borders, their eyes white with terror. No one spoke of victory. No one dared speak at all. Alara stood in the tower, Cale's cloak wrapped around her trembling shoulders, watching the horizon burn crimson. She knew this was no ordinary moon. Tonight was the night prophecy would break its silence. Tonight the alpha and the vampire would meet in a battle not just for blood, but for her. Cale entered the chamber, armor dark as storm clouds, his eyes pale blue flames. He was no longer merely a man, he was vow incarnate. "Stay here," he told her, voice a growl. "No matter what happens." Her throat tightened. "You cannot go alone." "I was born alone, Alara," he said, brushing his lips to her mark. "But I will die with your name in my mouth. That is enough." She clutched his hand, pressing it against her stomach. "You're fighting for more than me now." His gaze flickered, tender for a heartbeat before hardening. "Then I will fight until no shadow is left to steal what is ours." The horns sounded. Wolves howled. Cale strode into the night, and she followed to the courtyard despite the dread in her bones. She would not let him walk into eternity without her eyes bearing witness. The vampire waited in the clearing beyond the ash tree. He stood beneath the blood moon as if it crowned him, pale skin glowing like bone carved into beauty. His crimson eyes lit with hunger as Cale approached, sword gleaming silver in his hand, wolf aura radiating like fire. "You brought the night a gift," the vampire said, gaze sliding to Alara, "and the night will thank you." Cale's growl rumbled the ground. "You will not speak her name again." The vampire smiled. "But her body already carries me." Alara flinched as if struck. Cale's fury tore loose. He lunged, blade sparking against the vampire's claws. The air cracked as their forces met, wolf strength against centuries of hunger. The earth shook, trees toppled as though the forest itself bowed to their war. Alara stood at the circle's edge, every blow an echo in her ribs. Kale's strikes were ruthless, each one fueled by devotion. Every howl was her name flung into the night. But the vampire fought like inevitability itself, each movement patient, unhurried, as though he already owned the outcome. "You fight with rage," the vampire mocked, deflecting Kale's blade and slashing his shoulder. "I fight with time." "You fight with theft," Kale snarled, blood staining his chest. "I fight with vow." The clash rang like thunder. Wolves howled in chorus, their cries feeding Kale's strength. Alara clutched the iron rails until her knuckles bled, whispering his name into the night as if her breath could steady his arms. The vampire's whispers wound through her again. "See how he bleeds for you. Come, little flame, spare him. Join me, and I will let him live to worship you." Her body shook. "No," she whispered into the red night. "No." Kale faltered, blade clattering to the ground as the vampire's claw struck deep into his side. Blood poured bright under the moonlight. He staggered but refused to fall. "Mine!" he gasped, eyes locking on Alara. "Always mine." The vampire laughed, low and cruel. "Yours, even now. Watch her break when she feels me in the child." He pressed his hand over Kale's wound, twisting until Kale roared, the sound half agony, half devotion. Alara screamed, rushing forward, but Kale's eyes caught hers, commanding still. "Stay," he growled, even as blood soaked the ground. Every strike after was slower, every howl more desperate. Yet every blow still carried her name. The vampire pushed him to his knees, crimson eyes glowing brighter, feeding on Kale's weakening fury. "Die with your illusions, wolf," the vampire whispered, "and I will show her what forever feels like." Kale spat blood, a terrible smile twisting his mouth. "You may take my life," he said, voice ragged but clear, "but not her vow." With a final surge, Kale drove his blade upward, burying it into the vampire's chest. The scream that followed rattled the heavens. The vampire staggered back, smoke pouring from the wound. For a heartbeat, hope flared. Then Kale collapsed, bleeding out beneath the blood moon. Alara fell to her knees beside him, clutching his head in her lap. His blood soaked her hands, his breath shallow, fatting. "Alara," he whispered, voice softer than the night. "Salvation." Her tears fell hot onto his lips. "Stay with me, please stay." He smiled faintly, pressing one last kiss to the mark on her throat with trembling lips. "Mine," he breathed, and then his body slackened, eyes staring at the moon that had borne witness to his vow. The pack howled in mourning. The vampire's shadow loomed, wounded but unbroken, smoke already knitting his wound shut. He looked at her, crimson eyes burning with triumph and hunger. Kale's blood steamed beneath the moonlight, a sacrifice carved into the earth. Alara clutched his body, torn apart by grief, as the night whispered around her, half vow, half temptation. And as the blood moon sank lower, she realized love and obsession had bled across the night, and though Kale's lips had whispered her name like salvation, the vampire's shadow still waited, patient, promising that the war for her body and her soul was only beginning. The battlefield still smoked when dawn broke. The sky above the valley was pale and sick, painted gray by ash and blood. Alara stood barefoot on the charred earth, Kale's cloak dragging behind her like the shadow of a man who was no longer there. Around her, the pack wept and wailed, their howls fractured, their bodies bent with grief. They had not lost merely a leader. They had lost their oath, their shield, their alpha. Kale's body had been carried into the earth with reverence, wrapped in wolf skin and blood. The ground had drunk him whole beneath the blood moon's waning light, and Alara's tears had followed, salt staining the soil until she had no more left to give. The moment the last clod of earth struck his chest, silence had spread across the wolves like frost, a silence that would never thaw. And yet she stood, trembling with more than grief. Her hand strayed to her belly again and again, to the secret that even Kale's death could not steal. Within her stirred the flutter of life, a rhythm so delicate it could break her. But it was there, undeniable. His child. Their child. Or perhaps not only his. For the vampire had not fallen easily. His body had broken, smoke leaking from the wound Kale drove into his chest. But even in ruin, his crimson eyes had lingered. He had looked at Alara before vanishing into ash, whispering without lips, "Our heir lives in you. Do not deny me eternity." That whisper haunted her, now more than the silence of Kale's grave. The pack tried to gather around her. Wolves who once forced her to kneel now fell to their knees willingly, their heads bowed. Elders pressed hands over their hearts and whispered apologies. Children looked at her with wide eyes, as though she were both monster and saint. Myra approached first, the same woman who had once demanded Alara prove herself in ash. "Luna," she said softly, reverently, "you are all that is left of him. You are our queen now." Alara's mouth twisted. "I was your curse yesterday. I was your shame. And now I am your crown. You cannot build me into salvation from the ruins you carved into me." Myra's eyes welled. "We were blind, forgive us." Alara's gaze hardened. "Forgiveness is ash. It disappears the moment you breathe. Do not ask it of me." They lowered their heads, too late in regret. Kale's death had made her untouchable, not their reverence. That night she returned to the house she and Kale had shared. The rooms smelled of him still, wolf musk, leather, pine, smoke. She pressed her face into his cloak and inhaled until her lungs ached. The bed creaked under her as she lay curled, whispering his name to the empty sheets. She longed for his voice to answer, for his growl to steady her heart, for his hands to claim her until she believed no shadow could touch her again. Instead, the mirror across the room glowed faintly through its cloth. She rose slowly, barefoot, the boards cold under her toes. Her hand trembled as she pulled the covering away. In the silver she saw herself, not as she was now, but as she might have been under another fate, crowned in red, eyes glowing with immortal fire, lips curved into the kind of smile only centuries could teach. And in her arms, a child with crimson eyes that burned like candles. She staggered back. The whisper followed her. "Little flame, do not fear me, I broke with him. But through you I live, through you our heir rises. You are queen now, not of wolves, but of eternity." She clutched her belly, nausea and devotion warring. "No," she hissed. "You will not take him from me. You will not take what Kale left behind." "What Kale left is already mine," the vampire crooned. "You will learn there is no difference." She hurled the mirror to the floor. It shattered, shards scattering like fallen stars. But even broken, each shard reflected crimson eyes, watching. The next morning, the pack crowned her. They set her beneath the ash tree with garlands woven of thorns and blood-red blossoms. Wolves howled her name into the gray sky. "Alara, Luna, Alara, queen." She stood motionless, the crown pressing heavy into her scalp, her heart a hollow echo. They knelt where once they had forced her to kneel. They begged for her strength, her guidance, her womb. Her voice, when it came, was low and ragged. "Do not mistake me for salvation. I am grief in flesh. I am the ashes you kneel in. If I rule, it is because you burned my alpha to the ground with your doubt. If I bear hope, it is because the gods were cruel enough to leave me with it." The wolves lowered their eyes, shamed by truth. But still they chanted her name, because broken or not, she was all they had left. That night she sat alone in the chapel, candles shivering in their pools of wax. Her hands cradled her stomach, tears sliding down her cheeks as she whispered to the life stirring within. "You will not belong to him," she swore. "You are Kale's, you are mine, even if the world says otherwise." The flame guttered and a cold voice slid through the stones. "You are both. You are all. And when you crown yourself in ashes, you crown me too." She screamed into the night, her voice breaking into sobs that clawed the walls. Her body ached with the weight of destiny, torn between wolf and vampire, between vow and hunger. But when the sobs slowed, she rose. She wiped her cheeks, set her shoulders. She walked from the chapel to the pyre where Cale had been laid to rest. She touched the ash, pressing it into her skin until her fingers turned gray. And then she lifted her chin, facing the pack who still knelt, and the night that still whispered. "I am not your curse," she said. "I am not his heir. I am what Cale died for, and I am what you feared. I am queen, crowned in ash. If fate makes my womb a battlefield, then I will raise my child on fire and ruin." The wolves bowed deeper, trembling. The night stirred, amused and patient. Elara stood between them, grief blazing into crown, her womb carrying hope and horror alike. She was no longer merely Alpha's bride. She was ruin, treasure, queen, the woman for whom two monsters had bled, and for whom the world itself might still burn. And as the ashes of her Alpha clung to her skin like a crown, Elara understood that humiliation and glory now lived in her veins alike, and destiny had already marked her as the treasure both wolf and vampire would never stop bleeding to claim.